Hello, and welcome to the 7th episode of the Out of Interest podcast. Today, I am joined by Josh and Meg of the Tok Show. For those of you that don't know what the Tok Show is, it is a new take on the talk show formula, and it aims to revitalize and update talk shows for this generation. And having moved into the new studio and gained approximately 72,000 followers on TikTok in a matter of weeks, Josh and Meg are starting to gain a little bit of traction. So, how are you guys doing today?
Pretty good.
We're good. Thanks for having us on.
That's great. That's good to hear. So the talk show is different because I know it's kind of stuck in like mainstream media and TV networks and stuff. And it hasn't really, you get podcasts on TikTok and YouTube, this being an example, but you don't really get the kind of structured talk show formula. And I think it's really unique what you guys are doing with that, because it's not something, I guess it's something people think about, but no one actually does it. And you guys are doing it. So how did you guys get the idea for the talk show?
Yeah, well, I think it's been kind of a long, as it goes with ideas that kind of gestate over time before it kind of articulates into one idea. Maybe like a couple years ago now, I ran a Twitter video show called Retweet This that was canceled pretty quickly by its creator, myself, after like 5 weeks. But the inspiration for that was like seeing these, Ellen and, Kimmel and these different talk show clips on Twitter and being like, I see these, but I never see the full episodes and I don't really care to. What would it be like to create something for the internet that's like kind of like built on the internet very natively? So that Twitter show kind of died, and then had the idea for TikTok. I was on TikTok during quarantine as at Original Hot Dog was my first TikTok account where I dressed up in a hot dog suit, and that's kind of how I learned how like the algorithm worked and all of these things. Anyways, so I came to put these things together and then kind of approached Meg about the idea. It was like the person I wanted to do it with.
Yeah, and I just love TikTok.
Yeah.
I instantly was like, this is new and this is not what people say that it is, or it's not what its perception is. It actually is something that's way more complex and interesting. And, so any opportunity I have to make something with Josh, who really is someone who says that he wants to do something and then actually does it, I'm always excited to jump on those sort of projects.
Yeah, it's, your first video, it's coming up on 1 million views. I think you guys gained 55,000 followers after the first video. That's the perfect example of like the TikTok algorithm took your video and just, propelled it to the millions of views. And that's a great like morale boost to start off, to know you're going to have this audience.
For sure, we have these talks back and forth. So the post was up for a few days before it like started to take off at all, and I was kind of like, I thought it might do a little better, but it's okay. And then some random morning, like maybe 5 days after we posted, it started to pick up, and we have these texts back and forth where we're like, 100 followers, this is like such a big deal. And then, or I don't know, were you on a bus or?
I was on a bus going back to like, Josh moved recently, but I was going back to our place then. And he was like, oh, when we get to 1,000 followers, like I'll buy you dinner and celebration. And then I was like, oh shit, is it going to happen before I get off this bus? Because it was coming in that fast. And then in that day we got 10K. And then it was like, oh,
yeah, it was crazy. Only on TikTok, really.
Only on TikTok. So you've talked about kind of like late night hosts like Jimmy Kimmel and Jimmy Fallon in your kind of introduction video, but do you have any inspirations that you kind of look at and see, well, this is what these people are doing, how can I learn from that and build from that?
It's a good question. You might actually have more thoughts.
I think that as far as my interest in late night TV, it was actually primarily like The Daily Show and Colbert. I wouldn't say that definitely watched Fallon and Conan, etc., but that wasn't really my main interest. So I think when we're thinking about turning this into something that is able to work when it's short form, it's really helpful to look at like Eric Andre, or, you know, people who have more of like these like really powerful like segments,
Actually,
but
like
not necessarily
between two ferns.
yeah,
I
stuff like that.
Yeah, like I think like the late night show, I don't have like a host that's like, this is the reference. I think the late night show as a structure is a good reference, but I think all the more like personal references are more like kind of like internet, kind of like newer media based.
Yeah.
And like people who are already trying to update formats in that way.
Yeah, and I like the late night aesthetic also, which I guess we sort of try to emulate in some ways.
Yeah, the new studio. How's that working out?
Yeah, I mean it's a we can. So this is our bedroom or my bedroom, not our.
Oh
bedroom.
wow.
That Instagram post was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
We're just shooting this in our apartments. But we did move apartments, or I moved apartments with my friend Vincent.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of like, the studio is in a new place, but it's also where I sleep and where I eat. And
Yeah, I mean, this is my quote unquote studio, but I just wake up and then, you know, here it is.
But I wouldn't want it any other way, you know? Right?
No, it's
I think
so
like,
much easier. Yeah.
For sure.
So how does an episode get made? This is more focused on well, I say Meg, but both Meg and Josh, I don't know what the process is behind these videos. That's why I'm asking. How does an episode get made? Who does what?
So I guess initially it started with a lot of outreach, which we split up, I think mainly because we have like way different For You pages, to put it simply. We have different, you know, angles of who we see on TikTok. And so as far as interview videos, it's like outreach, lock it in. I watch the Zooms and record them while he does preparation, and we like link before and talk about what we want to get out of an interview.
And I think we're trying to do more and more of that like segment specific prep over time. I think that like, you know, what we're doing right now, podcasts are like really cool, and that like the conversations can be more like winding, and you can get, you know, achieve a different thing. And that's why like there are a lot of podcasts I love. I think what we've been trying to do is like, we've been realizing that like 1 minute is like so short, and like sometimes we have these great conversations that like, oh, like anyone who watched this full thing would like enjoy getting to know this person, but it's actually pretty hard to cut this down to a minute. So I think we're actually, the biggest development in our like pre-prep process has been like, how can we frame the conversation in like segments that would translate well to editing and videos.
Would you guys ever expand to YouTube, or is it like a TikTok exclusive thing?
No, for sure. I think like it's like YouTube and podcasts and maybe like even some Instagram stuff are very natural next steps. I think like what we were saying about the first video getting 1 million views, like that can only happen on TikTok. So I view TikTok, and I think we both do, as like the best place to launch something, but you really quickly at some point have to like be funneling people to another platform. I don't think we're like so close to that, but maybe not so far either. Getting people to jump to a platform is like, you know, they have to be really like bought into.
It's like a great example of this is someone I interviewed, Brad, the host of Blonde Radio, about a month back now.
Cool.
And he was saying he's got a big following on TikTok, but when he's posting like what you guys are doing, it's like 1 minute clips of his podcast, his interviews to TikTok, and they're getting like tens of thousands, 100,000 of views. They go on YouTube, they get like 100, like 200, 300 views, and it's kind of like the ratio is not there. This like the interest that people seem to have only extends to like 60-second long clips. When it gets past that, it's like they lose audience retention, and I get that as well all the time. Like my audience retention is getting like, again, it depends who I have on the show. It depends if people know them or not, but my audience retention went from like my first episode when it was like it was someone that was just kind of starting out. It was one of my friends that was starting her own podcast. The audience retention for that is like 2 or 3 minutes, and then my audience retention for my one I did last week with Scorpio Sierra, who's got like 200,000 followers on TikTok, that's the audience retention for that is like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Like I'm getting so much more mileage out of that.
Right. If anyone's listening to this right now, just like finish to the end of the podcast. We have something great coming. We're going to get these retention numbers up. The Tok Show episode is going to be the one that like.
I think it's interesting because on TikTok, like the way that someone is viewing a video, like sure you can see your views and you can see how long they watch, etc. But like people are watching it and liking it, but it doesn't necessarily translate to they want to see more or they thought it was great. Like I watch videos on TikTok over and over and don't like them and like look at the profile and I'm like doing a deep dive into like who is this? And it doesn't necessarily translate to like, oh, I want to see their 30-minute show. So it's like even though the views are so high, it's still like you said, you're like have to build up like who your real fans are. Which it's sometimes hard to parse, I guess, and especially if we're trying to do a lot of things right now.
My Twitter bio used to be, I'm just here to like simulate intimacy. And that's how I view a lot of these like Twitter personalities I follow and like podcasters. I think like I really dislike podcasts actually that are like, that feel very scripted. I think they can be like good, but I think it's not really like the best use of the form. I think it's like, I like 3-hour long podcasts where it feels like I'm like hanging out and can feel less lonely. And like, that's something that takes like months, many months. Like it doesn't happen by going viral once. It's like consistent content over a long period of time to develop that like, oh, I want to like be friends with this person, or I feel like I already am.
Yeah. So that's why it's so against my personal nature to have like the videos be 1 minute. Like I had I studied film and had a huge problem with all my projects where like we had time limits and I wanted them to be like 40 minutes long, and like I wanted to like sit in the pause and like have people talk forever. And there's so much towards like make it snappy. And I'm like learning a lot through that and like what is actually necessary to get an idea across. But I do love to like relish in the this is too long sort of vibe. So
I was gonna ask, who does the editing? Because I love the little overlay. The overlay is awesome. It looks good.
We both do. We split it up.
Yeah.
So we're probably like 50-50.
Yeah. Josh sometimes is heavier on like his own like recap vids. I think especially because it's way easier to like watch yourself and know what you're going for and like emphasize whatever like the bit is in those cases. But we are generally like split it up or like who really wants to edit this segment.
And you guys have managed to get some pretty heavy hitters in terms of guests for your first couple of TikToks.
I'm just curious, were there people that you like knew previously or were you introduced to them through?
Through your show? Yeah. I had heard of Hannah Harpist purely from like, I don't even know how. I just think I just saw something. The name rung a bell to me. Yeah. Obviously I'd had the sound and then and then your other guests I hadn't heard of before then. And I found them from your show, which is weird because they have like thousands of followers, like tens of thousands of followers, and I just didn't.
No, for sure.
I'm really interested in how many people on TikTok, like how many accounts have more than 500K. Like I really want that number so badly because I think it could be like a really, really high number, higher than any other platform, because there are so many segments of like alt talk and film talk and like who are big in each of these things. So we can get someone on who has 1 million followers, but like everyone it shows it to like doesn't know who they are, and I think that that's also really interesting.
It's regional as well, isn't it? There's like European creators you will not see in North America.
For sure. I would say the one exception that transcended that was my hot dog account, which did really well in Germany.
It was a global sensation.
Because they just love hot dogs there. I think that is the reason. It had like more followers.
Was it really?
More followers in Germany than in the US.
You should bring the costume back for a Halloween video.
For sure.
Needs to be done.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So, what do you guys feel about like trends in general? Because a lot of your guests, like Hannah Harpist, for example, wouldn't be as big as she is without trends. Do you guys feel that it kind of takes away from the creative process if you just have to follow trends the whole time, or do you guys not mind it?
I mean, I don't know if I was looking at someone's account today. I wish I could remember their name. Someone really big. She's probably like 16. And every single video is a trend. I actually couldn't find a single one of her talking. Like I didn't know her actual voice. And she had, millions and millions and is like one of the top followed accounts. And I would say that that's something that like, despite my best efforts, like I have a really hard time understanding. It's like part of being on TikTok is like, it makes me feel closer to a younger generation, but there is a segment of like the trends or like a purely trend account that like I feel like is beyond me. Like, and I'm like ashamed that it's beyond me because I want to get it so badly. I have nothing against it. Like I have nothing against trends. I actually think they're really useful for like exposure and like, getting yourself out there.
Yeah, I think so much of like TikTok videos and like I think trends come from this is like, can you quickly establish a context so that people have like something to grab onto, and then can you add your own spin? I think like accounts that are just doing the trends and aren't adding their own spin like do feel kind of like flat.
Yeah.
I follow someone, I think her name is Nikki Woods, and her bit is that she's in love with George Washington, and she has this George Washington. Do you know her?
I've seen her a couple of times. Yeah, it's strange just to see out of nowhere.
Yeah, strange, epic, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's like cool where it's like she'll do the trends, but then they all have this like George Washington angle, and you also feel like you're getting to know her. So I think like if you're able to like add that layer, like I think like we might do like break the format and do a trend at some point, but like only if it was like very specific to.
Yeah. I also think that it's really huge for people who are like, I want to make videos and I want to be involved, but like I don't feel like I'm creative enough to like know where to start. Like if I'm going to be in this video, like I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And so I think it's actually like a really encouraging like first step for someone who is like, I want to be a creator or I want to make content, but like where do I start? It's like as easy as literally following like a recipe for what your video can be. And I think that, whatever, like however mainstream it is or like uncreative, it's useful in that way.
Yeah. I know that it sounds bad. Seems like I'm just plugging my previous episodes, but literally last episode, this TikTok account, Froki is the best. It's run by this high school senior. She's called Sydney, and it's a film talk account. She makes little short films, and she had never made a short film before then, had zero interest in film, and now she's thinking about going to film school. And it's like TikTok did that. She started TikTok in March, having no clue about any of kind of making films, being a film student, and now she's going off and doing that. I think that's like it doesn't make sense to me at all how someone can just pick up a new interest from watching other people do it on TikTok. But at the same time, there's been so many examples of it that like
I love that. That's actually what I love most about TikTok is like its connection to film and people learning how to do like coverage and how to edit well and like what songs work and how they can like fake things and like I think going to school and like having like semi-rigid film structure, there's so much pressure of like you need so many resources and you need all this equipment, and I'm like in the same way think that way of like I can't make a movie like I don't have XYZ and I have no money and but I think like TikTok is the best example of like, oh, you have a phone and like you're making something out of like just you and your phone and whatever you have in your house. And like a lot of people are like, oh, do that. That's like, you can make a movie with no money. But like TikTok is like the place where I primarily have seen people like literally taking that to heart, I guess. And I think that that's cool.
Yeah. I want to kind of veer back towards the show a little bit because I just wanted to talk about in the future for the Tok Show.
Yeah.
I know I haven't specified, by the way, Tok Show, T-O-K for the guests at home, T-O-K. Not a regular talk show, the TikTok show, as in TikTok. I'll specify this better when I'm editing it, and I'll do a little intro to explain it. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm sure they'll get it. I'm sure they'll understand it. So what format will the account take in the future? Because I know you've talked about, the Eric Andre show having different segments. That's kind of an inspiration. But you've kind of got the interview format, and then you've got like the news with an example being like Walmart buying TikTok, that kind of thing. Where it's, it's kind of interviews and then it's humor and it's news. And like, which segments do you want to bring into the show in the future?
I think like maybe like games and kind of like more like pranky like bits or something we've discussed and haven't like tapped into a lot. And I think we need to figure out how it works within the format. One idea, I guess, like, I don't know if I should say it, it's like our secret. Like I love the idea, for example, that we find out someone's TikTok crush in an interview, and then we bring them back and like surprise them with the person.
Hold on, I'm gonna write this down.
Yeah. Oh no.
Somewhere. Yeah.
So like that's kind of like an Ellen bit.
Yeah.
That's like something she would do, but I think that would be like really fun.
I also think our world expands like tenfold when it's like lockdown is less of a constraint.
That's a great
when we can like visit people, or we can have people, like the things that we can do are just so much higher than they currently are. Yeah, like interview person. People, like in, wherever, like have them in our actual studio. Then you can pull actual pranks, or then you can have actual surprises. But right now, I guess it's like refine what we have and see what works is sort of our goal.
I think it's easier as well to get, well, for me, I quite like the Zoom format. I'm kind of thriving off of this. I think in person I'd be a lot more awkward. I don't have my notes up beside me as well. So it's kind of like, I'm not as accustomed to kind of standard podcast stuff, but like the Joe Rogan podcast, where they're kind of just sitting at a desk across from each other. I feel like that's a lot more personal. Like you can get to know a person more when you're talking to them that way. Yeah. I feel like the content you get out of it might be better. Like there's more highlights if it's kind of both you guys there.
For sure, 100%. Yeah, I feel like a lot of my like riffing and humor really relies on like eye contact with the person, where I'm like saying one thing in one tone, but like I'm communicating what I really mean, like through another layer.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like it's like maybe harder over Zoom to get that through.
And I would also say that like we're talking to like the guests for like 45 minutes, probably everyone so far. It's been like at least 45 minutes. And I would say like that is what makes some of the clips successful, or like I wish we can translate like how much familiarity is like built through like the conversation we have before that makes like a 1-minute video even like possible. I think the people seem comfortable, and it's because we like them and we talked to them for a while.
For sure. This was something that Meg like talked a lot about early on, and it proved like totally true, where it's like even if like we have this one segment idea that we know we want to do, and we're maybe not going to use some of the other stuff. Yeah, just like having that rapport so that when we get to that 1-minute segment, like we're totally comfortable with each other has been super important.
Yeah. I feel like what you guys have is kind of unique, but it's also been done before with like, network shows have like little snippets and advertisements that make you want to watch the show. And I think that's what I kind of have struggled with when I kind of started out. There's always a lull in the conversation somewhere.
Yeah.
And you can't say to the viewer or whoever your audience is that look, if you wait till like the 15-minute mark, then it gets good. You have to try and like from minute 1 keep them engaged to minute 30, or in your case 45. But when you're cutting it down, you can just take the little snippets that work and just promote that and produce that. And I think that's that's a really good format to have.
Totally. Like that's totally true. Also, like I think we've been finding it harder in practice than in theory. Like just cutting down the highlights and that working as a video. I think like our first interview had like, I think I was more inexperienced in terms of how to run these like segment interviews, and that made the editing harder in terms of like, oh, and we could just pull the highlights, it'll be engaging, but like it doesn't fully translate sometimes.
Also, then when you have rapport, like sometimes you're like a lot of your conversation is like callbacks. Like, and I don't even mean that in like an inside joke way. I mean that it's like it's building up upon like established things that you know. And so when you pull out that one bit, you're like, oh, that was so great. And then I go and edit that one section and I'm like, oh, it's actually not that great on its own. It like required what was beforehand. So it's like kind of a toss up. I think we're getting a lot better at it, but like sometimes you really think that something went well and then you pull it out of its like little shell and it's like, this is not, no one likes this.
I mean, it's definitely, in my opinion, it's getting better each time, and I think that's that's a good sign. You don't want to peak with your first video and then it's just kind of downhill from there. In terms of view count, you did, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say in terms of production quality, in terms of entertainment, it's definitely getting better. And I know that doesn't mean much coming from me.
No, it does.
It really does.
Yeah.
We don't, we get comments that are like first. So I love someone saying we're getting better.
But just to kind of cap off today's episode, because we're coming towards our time. I know you've spoken a little bit about, when quarantine can open back up, some of the when quarantine doesn't open back up, when it goes away.
Quarantine kills itself.
Quarantine kills itself.
Yeah.
We can all have fun again and enjoy it. And it's not just misery. You've spoken about having guests in the studio and stuff, but the Tok Show as a brand and as a living, breathing thing, where do you see that going in the future? Like, how far do you think you guys can take it?
We want to take it so far.
So far. Like, I think that eventually, if things go well, the Tok Show will be one staple within an umbrella brand that has many different shows run by many different people. I think that you're seeing like a rise in like kind of like personality based like media companies, and obviously like podcasters like Joe Rogan is like a one-man company. He's like so big, but then there are companies with many personalities that are big, and I think that there's an opportunity. There's like in sports and gaming, there are different brands that are based around like feeling like the people. I don't know if there's something, like hype houses are probably the closest in terms of like someone covering like internet culture, but I think that there's like a lot to do there. Yeah, so I'd say the Tok Show is like one idea, but I think there's like the sky is really like the limit in terms of what could come next.
Yeah.
I think it'd be so fun to like find our favorite influencers, have money, and like pay them to run a show and like help them with like have our team that's helping with like editing and graphics or whatever, and like have the shows interact. I think that there's like so much to do.
Yeah,
but we like to think, I like to think personally, I have a hard time with big picture. I'm like, how can this video be the best one? So that is the focus now, I think.
Yeah. So to end the episode, I want to congratulate both of you for what you've created. The Tok Show is fantastic. If you want to watch the Tok Show, if you want to see the TikTok account, the Instagram account, it'll be in the description of this video. So if you scroll down, you'll find it. If you're on Spotify, head over to the YouTube video or my Instagram account, and you will find the links to their TikTok account there. Meg and Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. That's pretty much it.